Ta-da! Finally, welcome to what I hope is the last Pincast on corporations. My goal is to explore how we use ratios to evaluate business performance in the stockholders' equity section of the balance sheet. Done that in every topic we've studied so far, and we're going to continue that. The three ratios we're going to learn in this chapter are the earnings per share ratio, the price-earnings ratio, and the rate of return, common stock ratio. But first, I digress. You'll recall from Chapter 1 in 1110 that we make financial statements so we can pass them to external users, and external users use them in the decision-making process. Do they want to invest in us or not? During the course of 1120 so far, we learned a few ratios. In Chapter 10, we learned asset turnover. Chapter 12, we didn't learn any that were particular to partnerships. And in Chapter 13, we're going to learn earnings per share ratio, the price-earnings ratio, and the return on common stock. There's a problem on the final where these ratios are calculated, and I see students losing way too many points for really simple calculations. So I'm going to make it a point to draw your attention as we move through where these ratios are, and then when we get to financial analysis chapter, they will be more familiar to you, and they're all listed on the same page. Our focus in this Pincast is going to be on the Chapter 13 ratios. I shouldn't use chapter references. I should use names. Chapters change. So let's take that off and use ratios to evaluate corporations. So first time I fell into that trap is right now, and I'm not going to do that. So we have planned assets and corporation ratios. Earnings per share, price-earnings ratio, and rate of return. I'm going to start with the earnings per share ratio, always called EPS. And I'll tell you what, this is the most widely used ratio to evaluate how a business is doing. And what it does is it says, let's take net income and subtract the amount that belongs to preferred stockholders, and that would be their preferred stock dividends, and divide that by the weighted average number of shares of common stock outstanding. And what that gives you is the earnings per share, the net income per share by stock. So it's a per share amount, earnings per share of the common stockholders, the residual owners of our business. They're the ones that will always get what's left. Let's talk a little bit about this formula. First of all, net income. Net income comes right from the income statement, and there are no changes made to it. It's just net income. And from that, we subtract preferred stock dividends, because that is the amount of preferred stock, or that is the amount of net income that belongs to our preferred stockholders. Everything else is available for the common stockholders. Well, since you're using an income statement number on top and a balance sheet number on the bottom, whenever you see that lineup, we almost always do an average. For purposes of this course, we're going to take our beginning number of shares of common stock plus our ending number of shares of common stock for the period and divide by 2 to get a weighted average share of common stock. You get a little bit more intense on how you calculate that in more advanced courses, but we're going to leave it simple for this introductory course to financial accounting. Let me write down some numbers for you and we'll work through this. Here's our facts. On our income statement for our business, it showed we earned $200,000. In our balance sheet, we can look at the common stock outstanding numbers, and we see that our beginning outstanding number of shares is 50,000, and our ending outstanding number of shares is 75,000. We can also see on our statement of retained earnings that we paid a dividend to preferred shareholders in the amount of 6,000. Notice I'm not including the common stock amount, just the amount for preferred stockholders. Taking our formula, net income is 200,000. Subtract the dividends declared on preferred stock and divide it by the weighted average number of shares outstanding. We started with 50,000. We ended with 75. To get an average of that, we need to divide that by 2. Let's do a little math and get things simpler. That leaves 194,000 on top, divided by 62,500 shares of average stock outstanding. Now you do the math. You'll find that that comes out to $3.10 per share, and I rounded to the nearest dollar. So my earnings per share for this corporation for this period is $3.10. You would want to do a trend analysis and see how that looks over a period of time within this business, and you would want to do some comparisons with the marketplace and the industry. And then you could decide if you think the earnings per share for this business showed that it were healthy, or if it were cause for concern, helping you make your investment decision. Let's move on to the price-earnings ratio. Price-earnings ratio is a great tool to help determine how much you should be willing to pay for a share of stock. It also lets investors know about how much each dollar that they have invested earns for how much a company makes. It's a great way to also spot if a company is undervalued or overvalued. The common price-earnings ratio is somewhere around, 15, but it varies by industry. Let's get a handle on the formula. The name itself tells you how you calculate it. You take the market price of the stock and divide it by its earnings per share, as we calculated in the last ratio. It seems like you have to calculate a lot of ratios. It's not really true, because earnings per share is printed right on the face of an income statement. So, our formula is to take market price divided by earnings price per share. Let's get some facts. So our formula is market price divided by earnings per share, and our facts say our stock is selling for $50 a share, and our earnings per share is $3.10, like we calculated above. What is our price-earnings ratio? Put me on hold, calculate it, and come on back. The number is $16.12. What this tells you is that for every dollar our stock earned, we're paying $16.12. To really know what this means is, first of all, the norm's around 14.15, so that seems good. But I would like to do a trend analysis on my business, look at this ratio over the last 5 years, and I'd like to do an industry comparison of my biggest competitors and decide if I think my company's doing well, or if this ratio is showing signs of my company being soft. Oh, there's our earnings per share ratio and our price earnings ratio. Let's move on to our last ratio. And that is our rate of return on our common stock. It's also shortened to be return on equity. You'll often see the ratio written like that. And what it does is it shows the relationship between net income that's available to our common stockholders and how much they have in common equity invested in the business. Let me write down the formula. First of all, remember it's for common stockholders. So we'll take net income from the financial statement and subtract from that any money that was paid out to the preferred shareholders by way of dividends. And we'll divide that by the average amount of common stockholders' equity. Again, notice one number coming from the income statement, one number coming from the balance sheet, so the balance sheet being averaged. And this will give you a percent. And this percent tells you how much you're getting, what kind of a return you're getting on the money you have invested in this business. Let's give you some facts and we'll calculate a return on equity number. Here's our facts. We have net income of $200,000. Preferred dividends paid of $6,000. Our common stock at the beginning and the end. Our preferred stock at the beginning and the end. Our retained earnings, beginning of the end, and our total. The retained earning, or the total amount of stock of our the total of our stockholders' equity that is applicable to preferred stock is their amount of stock that they own. So I'm going to pull that out. This is the preferred stock amount. That means the common stockholders, who are the residual owners of the business portion of stockholders' equity, is $400,520. And I wrote all of these numbers down so that you can see preferred stock is pulled out, and this is the amount that belongs to the common stockholders. Let's go with our formula. Net income, $200,000, minus the amount paid to preferred stockholders of $6,000, divided by our average investment in this business, which is $400,000 plus $520,000. Take that and divide that by 2. Let's bring it down to more simple then. 194 divided by 920 divided by 2. That equals 460,000. Now we're ready to calculate the ratio. It comes out to a whopping 42.10% return on our investment. I don't know about you, but that's a heck of a lot better than a checking account or a savings account to me. I probably should have had my stockholders' equity section be bigger, but that's okay. In the land of textbooks, la la la, this is definitely a positive sign for our business, with the rate being 42% return. Wahoo, wazoo. Drop your money in and sign me up. Again, you would want to do a trend analysis on this and industry and market comparisons to decide if you feel like we're moving in a good direction or a not so good direction. This then is how investors can use ratio analysis and decision making. Spend a little time making sure you understand the ratios from each chapter and how to calculate them. It'll pan out big on the final. And I'll be so much happier when I grade it. And probably the thing I'm happiest the most with is this is the end of our lovely chat on corporation. Au revoir.